Is it running? Yes.
We're back on record? Oh. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
First, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I want to, full disclosure situation, I happen to be vice chairman of this organization that's making the presentation, so I want you to know that, the concept of full disclosure. And the reason why I suggested that we hear about this is because it's obviously, as you will hear, a big problem in our country today, and it affects both employers and employees, and it affects obviously somebody like the city, the amounts of money that they have to spend on the performance of their employees, and as far as employees are concerned, about how it affects their families when they get on these particular drugs, and also from our standpoint, when we have a disability or an accident and people get on the drugs, that's a cost factor to our pension fund as far as if there's a total disability situation. So that's why I thought this would be a good presentation. For that reason, and for you all to know, we have union representatives here, and they represent a lot of employees, and I think they should have some knowledge about what's going on in this situation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I put my full disclosure on the line, not of everything that I've ever done in my life, but something along the lines of pertinent to this presentation.
Duly noted. You may proceed, sir.
Well, I appreciate being here for the government employees and the sanitation employees of Miami, and for the people of America and all throughout the country. It's been a major problem. The biggest problem we have as far as a crisis that's affected pretty much everyone, through families, through employment, through government, through society, through prisons, through hospitals, everywhere. And I want to talk about addressing this and what the realities are and some solutions we've looked at. In my case, I was a terminal cancer patient over a year ago. They said there was no treatment for me. And I actually used the endocannabinoids so I could get through the chemo. They said that nobody ever else has withstood. And here I am today, which they said was impossible. So being chairman of the board and being recognized to be the chairman with some of the founders of the committee, the foundation that are here, that are on the board, and part of that, they asked me to join and help build a foundation, obviously raise money, but find some treatments that work. For the last 50 years, whatever's been used hasn't worked. I've talked to a lot of research and rehab facilities, and they tell me what we've done for the last 50 years hasn't worked, but people are getting paid millions and millions of dollars in insurance money. And they're running from 96 to 98% recidivism. And the rest of the people, unfortunately, have perished. So I want to talk about the realities here. The crisis really is, it's tripled since '99. There's 115, 116 deaths a day, and it's rising. It's not going down, it's going up. As a matter of fact, the New York Times said 2 days ago, the national epidemic hit record levels in 2017 with no end in sight because of the synthetic drugs that are out there. They've curtailed a lot of the prescription drugs, which caused a lot of the opioid overdoses, but now we have street drugs because people can't get them, which has made the crisis even worse. And if you look at the statistics here, you can see the increases that have represented 77,000 deaths last year. And those are the ones that are reported as opioid deaths. How many overdoses, how many hundreds of thousands of overdoses where they're hospitalized or where they're in treatment and they haven't died, but their soul may have died. We look at the epidemic and we look at Florida having one of the highest rates in the country. Palm Beach County lost 613 people last year, overdoses of death. Delray Beach had 600 overdoses, many of which were deaths. And you can look at the states that have the biggest problems, and Florida stands out as probably number one. A lot because the veterans, 25% of the suicides in Florida, which is the highest rate in the country, are returning veterans on opioids. And there's no end in sight. OxyContin came from Purdue Pharmaceutical Company in '96. $400 billion has been spent buying that. And you look at the pill mills, you look at what's happening now with the fentanyl and the synthetic heroin and what's out on the streets today. That's very difficult to deal with and very difficult to identify how can we treat people. What I'm looking at is dealing with crisis management now. I say we're at 95% crisis management and 5% proactive management. But how can we turn that around? And we've looked at some things that have worked, literally therapies that have worked, and we're in the process, which I'll discuss, of putting some rehabilitation that's shown to work in place. You look at what's happening, and you can look at the chart there. I've got a circle around it. That line going up are the synthetic drugs that are killing people, the synthetic heroines, the fentanyl, the carfentanil, and the heroin that's coming across the borders. And it's only growing up. Something that's amazing. In 2016, which had 20,000 less deaths than 2017, more people died from opiates than the entire Vietnam War. Think about that. That was in 2016. We had more deaths that were reported from opiates than the entire Vietnam War, and it went up 22,000 last year with no end in sight. You look at the number of deaths that have happened in the last 10 years, and you're beyond the entire Civil War. And you look at what are the current treatment options. They have a medical applied technologies through medicine. What are those medicines? They're not working. You've got methadone. What is that? Synthetic heroin. You've got Suboxone. You've got other drugs that they've combined together to block the ability to get high. But what happens is with that blockage, it makes them more susceptible. So when they do use the drug again, they overdose because their body is susceptible to what's been used. So it's not working. And you look at different, medication with therapies, it's not working. And we need to identify what works, and we have in some cases. You look at emergency overdose prevention, and this is the first thing from the Opioid Awareness Foundation that we're looking to raise funds for. And I've got 5 committees we defined within our organization. Senator Silver is the vice chairman, and he's working with us with fundraising, with awareness, with getting to where we are right now, where I'm able to speak to a group that cares, that knows they can make a difference, and needs to understand what's going on and what can we do and how can we do that. Another committee we've created is the response committee to get the naloxone, the Narcan inhalant to the people, get it to the first responders, get it to the metros, get it to the convenience stores, Miami, throughout Florida, throughout the United States, and in West Virginia and Ohio and Pennsylvania. They're putting in blue lights in the convenience stores because they're finding people dead in their bathrooms. They're putting the blue lights so they can't find their veins because they find out so many times they knock on the door and they come in and the person's overdosed, dead. And we have to be able to have that to bring these people back. You think about the school shootings, and it's terrible. But think if we could take the bullets out of those kids that have been shot, or we can take the bullet or the opioid out with the naloxone, with the Narcan spray, which does not always work when you're dealing with the carfentanyls or the fentanyls. And we need to educate the population on what they can do. But most importantly, we need to identify those areas that need the help. Get the naloxone out there and educate people what to do and when to do something. So, this is not a treatment. It's bringing somebody back to life. And that's the one thing is, in response, we want to be able to bring the people back and then get them to treatment once they've realized they actually died and we brought them back. Now we want to keep them alive. We have to figure out a way to do it and do it right. The limitations, when you look at the cravings, are continuing. The recidivism rate, I said it's 96 and 98%. As I said to one of the rehab people who wants to change what they're doing because they're collecting money and they're feeling guilty, because they said, 96 to 98% recidivism comes back, and the rest of the people are gone because they died, they overdosed. And what's in between that? Nothing. Millions of insurance dollars going to what? I'm going to give a very scary example of what's happened in Delray Beach, where I live. These sober homes, they lock the kids, a lot of them from Midwestern families. They're locked in a room, they get insurance money until they can't anymore. But when they go on a leave, they have a broker try to give them an opioid for free, so they can't come back in, and they get Baker acted for 3 days. And then they can't come back because they give them a benzodiazepine, which they can't come back because it's in their system. So they get another 3 days at triple the insurance rates. And the scariest part of that is the people that live in the neighborhood see this. They see the kid's face come and go. Then they see him leaving with a suitcase. Insurance ran out. Probably didn't even tell their parents what's happening. But guess what? They see in the paper that person overdosed that night because they had nowhere else to go. And that's what happened over and over and over again. So you look at what has worked. Canada did a program. They've done a couple of programs. One, they had 1,000 opioid addicts. They got 57% off of opioids without withdrawals. The other 97% reduced their usage. 57% got off without withdrawals. Never heard of. We haven't been able to do that in America because the Schedule I with marijuana, and it wasn't marijuana that did it, it was the cannabinoids that did it. They didn't smoke it, they took it as a tincture or orally, and it was monitored. But it worked, and we're looking at making that work here. You look at the endocannabinoid system, which, interestingly enough, acupuncturists for the last 2,000 to 3,000 years talk about how acupuncture works. But they didn't know how. Just in the last 4 to 5 years, they realized acupuncture works as a homeostasis for the body because of the endocannabinoid system. And we're finding that for a lot of things because there are more cannabinoid or endocannabinoid receptors than there are opioid receptors. So if you can flood the body and compete with those cannabinoid receptors, with the opioid receptors, the cannabinoid receptors win. And that's the start of the rehabilitation. We can do that in Florida. And I'm going to talk about people that we're doing it with. You look at the different things, the benefits. There's over 100 chemicals. People talk about the CBDs and the THC. There's 100 other chemicals. And the THC isn't what does it. Even in Canada, they used a 4 or 5% THC solution with these people and flooded them with cannabinoids. So it's not something that's really scary. Unfortunately, we've got a kind of a blockage out there. I don't know. They look at this as a major drug. We're looking at a plant, like most things, and what can we extract from that can help people holistically, organically, and naturally. And that's how we're looking at doing this. And getting the research, get funding so we can do the research, because insurance isn't going to pay for it. And the people that need it probably don't have the money to pay for it. The veterans, the kids that don't know any better. And there's something that needs to be done. We look at what could be done. There was a study done with the opioid overdoses in 2014. There's a study done in 2017. And we look at what can be done. The states that have legalized marijuana, it's very strange, medical marijuana, because you're managing how you're using it. There's 14 different things that are used here, that are identified for a use of it. But the reality, every one of those states has had, believe it or not, drunk driving's gone down. The statistics have been overwhelmingly in favor of the society. And it's been a very positive thing. And you look at the studies with chronic pain and the opioids with cannabis, the cannabis wins, or the cannabinoids win, and the opioids lose. And we win if that's the case. we save lives, we keep people alive. They link, if you look at the different studies, and everybody's got a handout, I don't need to go through the specifics. You've got a handout to look at the statistics and look at what's really happening. Unfortunately, there haven't been studies in the US because nobody can document those studies as a national research facility because there's only 29 states that have the ability to do that. But we have the ability to do that here in Florida. Hasn't started yet, but it's going to start now. We've identified research facilities that are going to do it. There's one here in Miami that asked, can we please be part of that? So we need to create, funding for that. One of our board members is in the legislature, and she's looking for a grant from the state to do that. But we can't wait for that. We really need to get funding. We really need to identify. We've identified the patients. We've identified a rehab that started, and we're going to start implementing that. And we need to start implementing that. It's a shame that it hasn't been implemented here in America yet. And you look at the rationale based on the interventions. Well, it's pretty simple when you look at the rationale and what has worked. And when something works, you want to communicate that to people. You want to document it. You want people to know. As of last month, they said only 5% of the US population knows about CBDs. How many people here have heard of CBDs? Okay. Okay, well, you'll see it, but the point is that's the CBDs are the extract of the cannabinoids. And a lot of this can be treated without THC and just the CBDs. And it's helped a lot of people with pain. It's interesting, Parkinson's patients, I had a doctor, showed me a picture his wife took where he couldn't hold a glass of water at dinner. And he took the CBDs and they took a picture after that, and he was holding his glass up saying, hey, look, elderly gentleman, and it made a difference. And that's just with Parkinson's, but we're talking about completely life-saving differences. Here's the study they did with another 574 patients where they had 51%. So a majority of the people in that program got completely off opioids. And if you look at the other percentages, it makes a difference. I know the governor of Illinois wanted to mandate cannabinoid treatment for opioid addicts. The governor of Pennsylvania wants to follow, but there's no good track record in the US. And we're gonna have that track record here in Florida, and we're gonna have that throughout the country. The Opioid Awareness Foundation is a national foundation. We're headquartered in Boca. And with the help of Senator Silver, with the help of all the people here, the members of the foundation that are here, it can make a huge difference. And we're looking at the trial program that I talked about. The Opioid Awareness Foundation is looking at this trial program administered through the Community Cannabis Center, which is part of ComCan Healthcare. And Curaleaf, there's 7 licenses in the state of Florida. Curaleaf was one of the first of them. Stephanie from Curaleaf, who's the outbound research person and community person, is now on our board. They're going to donate the medicine to these rehabs since we can't buy it. And then we have it's very interesting, in West Palm Beach, which is in the same district as the delegate to Florida, a couple that owns 4 rehab facilities. Their medical director was the medical director for Wellington Regional Hospital. Prior to that, he had 57 doctors in private practice. It was one of the largest private practices in Southern Florida. And they came to us, please, can you help us create a rehab to do that while they're moving forward? And they've been contacted by a Miami rehabilitation that would like to be part of that. So we want to create an umbrella that really creates the research, creates a test research council. One of my board members, Dr. Davis, who's involved with the Community Cannabis Center as well as myself, he had the research for 20 years for hepatitis C. He found a cure for hepatitis C. When they started 20 years ago, 6% of the people with hepatitis C were able to find some cure. Now we're at 100%. I don't know if you're familiar with Gilead, has a as a drug, but they did the research right here. And I'd like him to do that, if we can get funding, to have that research managed for the veterans that have opioids addictions, for all the people here in Florida that have opioid addictions, and get them through a program that works, that's proven, and get that implemented throughout the state, throughout the country, and let legislature know, let the president know, let the people that need to know what works, because they're saying it's the biggest crisis in the nation. Well, what's been done about it? Nothing, other than the same old things that haven't worked. So we're going to do something that works, and we want to get the input of the people, and we don't want to have it as a stigma. You know, oh, marijuana. No, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with plant-based therapies that work, that are holistic, that are organic, and that aren't, nobody's overdosed ever from cannabinoids, ever. The mortality rate for thousands of years is 0. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds and thousands of deaths and millions of overdoses, and we can't get it right. Guess what? We can get it right, and we're gonna get it right. And that's what I want to do. That's what the foundation wants to do, and that's what I want to engage people to be able to do. Because I'm sure it's affected everybody to some degree. You know, I know people that have died, whether it was accidental or not, doesn't matter. They're dead. And it was from opioids. I look at the musicians, whether we go back to the narcotics, which are opioids, from Elvis Presley to Judy Garland, to Jerry Garcia, to Tom Petty, to Michael Jackson, to Prince. We could go on and on and on. Those were all opioid overdoses. Those were all deaths associated with opioids. That didn't need to happen. And of all people, they should have been able to be helped, just like everyone else. Those are well-known people. What about all the unknown names? And what about all the people that died from opioids that weren't documented as an opioid death because the family didn't want that? Unknown causes, heart failure, sure their heart stopped. But that wasn't documented as an opioid death. So these are the ones that are documented. Think of all the other ones that aren't documented. So we're looking at doing this with counseling, with acupuncture, with activities, with a quality of life, not locking somebody in a room and giving them methadone or Suboxone and then looking to get more insurance money for their benefit, for their greed. It's not about that. It's about being altruistic. It's about being helpful. It's about being real. And I'm trying to bring reality, and that's really what I'm wanting to communicate, and that's the awareness of the foundation. So we look at doing this, and the conclusions of this really are: the crisis is not abating. The synthetic heroin, the synthetic opioids are getting worse and worse and worse. And we need something to change that, and we've identified that. And with your help, for the city of Miami, for the state of Florida, for the United States, we can do something, and we're gonna do something. And I'm asking for your help to make that happen. Thank goodness Senator Silver identified for the government employees, for the city, for all of you independently, for the unions. I think everybody understands and can relate to what I'm saying, and to some to a greater degree than others, but I think all of us truly understand. We have a crisis, and we need to do something. We need to do it fast, we need to do it right, we need to do it logically with common sense. And unfortunately, I don't think any of that's happened yet. And from this point on, I'd love to put that stake in the ground and say, you know what? Together, collectively, please help the people out there. Thank goodness, I've never had an opioid addiction. I haven't done that. I used this to save my life from cancer that they said was impossible. Well, thank goodness I'm here. I'm probably here for a reason. And that reason may be to stand up here and communicate and save some lives. I saved mine, and they couldn't understand, how could I walk into chemotherapy with a smile? Well, it's another day being here. Why can't I just smile and enjoy life? Why can't we all do that? And it's hard sometimes when you deal with these atrocities. But in looking at what's going on, you know, with the medicine-assisted therapy, which is all another big farm. Oh, we can bring in all these medicines. They don't work. They haven't worked, and it's just bringing money to people that shouldn't be getting money for something that they're not doing to help society or those that come into their facilities. Let's be real. And let's look at, there's counseling. Gotta get the Narcan out there. It's a promising alternative to do this. But we really need to do what's right. And I'm available for communications with anybody, and I'm gonna make myself available. You've got the handouts, you've got some information on the Opioid Awareness Foundation. I think everybody has my card. And I really wanna dedicate my energy, my life, and my capabilities of communicating or being a middleman to communicate to whoever and wherever it needs to be. So if you can wind me up and put me out there to talk to whoever it needs to be to make something happen, I'm available. And I really appreciate this forum and the opportunity to speak to everybody very frankly, very candidly. It doesn't seem like people are discussing this, especially not at a professional or an intellectual level like we need to. And this is serious, and this is real. So what we want to do is assist in further conducting these trials. iCare, Curaleaf, a lot of other people are going to get on the bandwagon. They're begging to get on the bandwagon now because they realize, wow, maybe we've got our nose under the tent and we can make this what it needs to be, a solution. And that's what we like to bring, solutions. So with that said, I appreciate this. I'd love for everybody to help with this solution and help if anybody can bring funds to the Opioid Awareness Foundation for these reasons. And with that, I'm open for any questions or dialogue.
I have a question for you. I want to go back. You made a comment earlier about the opioid crisis. And I was reading your report. It sounds like something really bad. I see in your report you were saying that somehow it blocks their receptors where they can't have no sense of feeling or awareness. So it sounds like zombies. And the way you described it, in my mind, looks like there's some kind of conspiracy to do this. It just sounds mind-boggling when you have methadone, which is part heroin.
Correct.
To give somebody to wean off drugs, but isn't that bad already? But where have you guys gone for funding? Have you guys lobbied the federal government?
Well, we just, believe it or not, we cut the ribbon, gosh, just 2 weeks ago. 2.5 weeks ago, we cut the ribbon. So we're really just getting our nose under the tent. We'd like to ask the federal government, I'd like all your help. I know people here have some connections to others that need to know. And yes, I would say you're 100% right. It is a conspiracy. And it needs to be dialogue. Unfortunately, what I'm talking about, you don't hear on television. You know, it's like there's a stigma. Oh, you're going to treat it with marijuana. No, that's not what we're going to do. People aren't going to sit around smoking marijuana to get rid of opioid addiction. That's not what's going to happen. And this is really plant-based organic therapy, pulling the cannabinoids out. And there's a stigma of Woodstock, Haight-Ashbury, people sitting around passing a joint. That's not what this is about. But no, I appreciate what you said. So yeah, I would say conspiracy is a very profound and adequate word.
I'm at another level. First, I want to congratulate you for the passion
Thank
that
you.
you have. Don't ever lose it.
Okay, I'm trying not to.
And I also want to commend you for not quitting before cancer. Now, having said that, I'm a little bit practical, and I want to throw a couple of initials at you, just because I'm wondering, where is the AMA in all of this? Where is the Florida Board of Medicine on all of this? And why are they ignoring you?
Several reasons. They can't make money on it. They're not getting insurance money for one. Two, they're scared because the federal prohibition, Schedule 1. Do you realize that marijuana is scheduled as a worse drug than heroin on the federal registry? Right now. It's listed the same as LSD and ecstasy. Cocaine's a Schedule 2. Marijuana is a Schedule 1.
I'm in agreement. Why aren't we before the AMA? Why are we not causing something to happen so that instead of having to break a door, we can come in the front door with the reports? You know, I sat in on the state of Florida medical board meeting where this was being brought up, I would say about a year ago. And there was more talk about how it was going to be distributed, that is legal marijuana, than about this that you spoke about today. Can't you guys get in front of the board? I mean, what's preventing?
Well, we've only been 2.5 weeks, so I'm ready to get in front of the board today, tomorrow. If anybody can get me in front of the board, wind me up, take me there, nationally. I mean, my background, I ran a congressional campaign in college and went to Washington, spent 13 years, and did a number of things. I founded the Holocaust Museum, designed the Holocaust Museum, was on the board there. And to me, this is a Holocaust, growing up in southern Indiana and going to Washington, I said, the Holocaust is everybody's issue. It's not just about what happened in Germany or anything else. And to me, this is another, I'm on this foundation as this is the Holocaust, but guess what? We're looking at it straight in the face. This isn't history, this is today. And so yes, I'd love to get in front of the AMA nationally, on a state level. If anybody has access or any recommendations, I'm ready to speak to everybody. I mean, this information, I would love to be all over the media. I'd love to sit in front of Congress and talk to Congress, because I tell them, I said, you know what? Everybody's polarizing and talking about, what's good for this party or the other party. And I say, folks, this is your only bipartisan issue. You want to be bipartisan? Let's deal with this issue. Everybody come together. Stop this polarization, because it's doing no good. And you're right. It's being very selfish. It's about money. It's about the insurance companies, about the AMA trying to protect themselves. And we need to protect society and cut through the barriers. We don't need to tear the door down. They need to open the door for us. And if anybody can help open those doors, now's the time to do it.
You reckon that, Ron?
Yeah. I wish you'd explain it a little bit, because I'm not sure everybody understands. When the first responders come across somebody that's suffering, what do they do to help that person and get them, maybe save their life or whatever? I'm not sure everybody understands.
I was talking about Narcan. Narcan, and that's our first line, is to get Narcan, raise money to get Narcan out there, while we're building these treatment facilities and identifying, what works best. Because, we're trial and error, but we know what's worked with the trials, so I don't think there's too much error involved here. I think the error has been the last 50 years. But as far as the Naloxone and the Narcan, it's a nasal spray. You give that nasal spray, they're out, they're dead, their heart stopped, they're turning blue. They get the Naloxone, the Narcan nasal spray, they come back to life, depending on the volumes. If they're on a fentanyl or a carfentanil, they may not come back. And the first responders might need to use the Narcan on themselves because they came in contact with a lethal dose or a nearly lethal dose. So getting that to the schools, getting that to the universities, getting that to Metro, getting that to the convenience stores, and being able to bring people back. I know somebody was telling me recently, it was just someone I happened to come across. They said, I was at this convenience store knocking, and the person was in there. And, that guy's been in there a long time. They came in and they were out. They had died, but they got him Narcan. They brought him back to life. They called 911, and he went to the hospital alive, not dead. One of our committees, Luis Garcia, he was a EMT for 28 years. Never used any drugs, alcohol, nothing. But he saw what was going on. As he retired after 28 years as an EMT in Palm Beach County, he took $40,000 of his own money to buy Narcan and distribute it. He himself came across 12 people last year that he brought back to life with the Naloxone nasal spray as a civilian. And his whole focus in that committee is to get that out, to have a map of the United States, as I showed earlier, in those areas that need it, so they can get access. I know they had issue now with the fentanyl where they've run out in Arcane and a lot of EMTs and they can't afford it. They can't get any more. I was just reading a report yesterday. We've run out in Arcane, our EMTs and our police and fire and emergency. Can anybody help us? Are there any other counties that have spare that they can send to our county? This was, a plea for help. We've run out. Can anybody help us? But is anybody out there that understands it? Like Senator Silver said, how many people really understand that? And the education, that's the awareness, the opioid awareness is be aware, why is that person out and what do you do about it? Well, that's the first response and getting that out. It's amazing how many police departments and fire and emergency departments don't have any or don't have a budget for it. But they sure have budgets for a lot of other things. And when you're looking at more deaths, 116 deaths a day that we know of and going up, you'd think that would be a reason to get that out there. But I don't think people are aware, and that's where we're starting. And I think this forum, the people that are here, you understand it enough that you can communicate it to others. And like I said, this is the stake in the ground. We're starting right here and right now. And from wherever I can take this communication, this passion, this energy, this knowledge, this awareness, help me get it there. And help me raise the funds for us to save these people. And we have a long road to hoe, but I think looking at where we are, what we've done in such a short time, and bringing the people on board and getting them aware, it's pretty amazing. But we really need help. We need you people here to really do what you're doing and help us figure it out. Help me, figure out the next steps, whether it's getting to the AMA or wherever. As you leave this room today, in the seminar that you've had, I want you to think of how you can help and maybe go through some of these and help build a program for the public, for the employees, for society. And thank you for your questions. Does anybody else have any input or questions?
Any other questions, anyone?
Does anybody have any experiences that they'd like to share?
Okay, I have Corey Taylor, Executive Vice President. Speaker. Corey Taylor, Executive Vice President. When I'm in the solid waste department, so nice work at night. I'm a sweep operator, so I have witnessed a couple of people pass away within the city of Miami, and they come and put the little thing in their nose, and they just jump right back up and go to running around and stuff. So I can relate to what you're saying. But also, some of the medications they prescribe to you, you might not know it, but if you mix that with alcohol, the same thing will happen to you.
That's correct.
I know some people that suffer from spinal injuries, that they get those type of medications. They'll prescribe you that medication, but they won't give you a prescription for the proper stuff. You understand what I'm saying? So I can relate to that.
Well, it's interesting. If you sprain your ankle and you go to the emergency room, you're going to be prescribed narcotics. And the other issue with rehab, and thank goodness I haven't experienced that, but talking to the owners of the rehab, they said, Steve, what we're doing doesn't work, but it's even worse than that. They come in with an opioid addiction, now they're depressed, now they're on a depressive medicine, now they're on Prozac or Zoloft or lithium or all the above. Now they can't sleep and they're on an Ambien or a sleep substitute. Now they're on 5 different medicines, they came in as an opioid addict. Now they've got opioid addiction and 4 other things that they can't get out of their system. And he said, we could do that with the cannabinoids without any of that. I know when I took the cannabinoids, and it was just a little gelatin capsule I took, a couple times a day. And I didn't feel depressed, but I went into that chemo room, and I'm telling you, everybody else was on feeding tubes and a gurney and couldn't speak for themselves, and they were really depressed. And believe it or not, their diagnosis wasn't to the extent mine was. I had 2 advanced stage 4 cancers that were untreatable. Well, hey, here I am. So, if that can work, well, whatever.
Amen.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Do you mind introducing some of your members of the foundation?
Yes, I would. And there's one person individually who, he and his father started this from a small church in Pennsylvania. Mike King. And Mike, do you mind saying anything about, I think it's very powerful because your story got me here to be the chairman of this foundation.
How's everybody? How are you? Michael King. It's my first time being in a situation like this in front of all brilliant minds like you. So I'm a little nervous, but I'm passionate in what I'm after here. I lost my whole life to opiates.
Take your time.
But you're here now. You didn't lose your whole life because you're here.
Yeah.
You're off opiates and you're doing wonderfully.
I lost my daughter about 5 months ago due to addiction. I've lost my son, basically. He's stuck in a room still trying to get off of Suboxone. I lost 20 years in a relationship to my father and my father. I went through hell and back. I had to die before I could be reborn. I'm reborn, and I'm here to help, and I have a deep passion to go after this and destroy it at the highest level I can. And I just believe that it's my life mission to educate and to bring awareness and to also go after prevention, because we could talk about everything that's going on now, but if we don't go after prevention, then the leak will never stop. You can keep mopping, but if you never ever go to stop that pipe from leaking, it's just going to get worse. So I'm really passionate about going after the children and helping them, because in today's music culture, they've made it okay and acceptable to be an addict. They're pushing it more and more through music. Now, I don't blame hip-hop. Hip-hop was beautiful when it first came out. It's the direction that it went in afterwards, and a lot of direction in other music culture. It's not just hip-hop to blame, but they've made it like where, you know, it's okay to do drugs. They're talking about it in songs. They're pouring it. There's 8-year-olds pouring lean. You know what lean is? Lean is a syrup that is an oxycodone basis codeine, but kids are drinking that because of hip hop culture, and there are 8-year-old children drinking that on Instagram, and I wish and I pray all of you look into this. And there's millions of it, and there's millions and millions and millions of social media going on every day that's not going to stop until we make a difference in it, and we need to make a difference today. Kids really think it's okay to do drugs. They really think this is the new life. And I can tell you something, I wasn't the best man. I was saved by God, but I was controlled by a demon for 20 years, okay? And I just had good morals because I grew up good. But there's a lot of people possessed by that demon, and you're talking about zombies. Like you said, that's exactly what you are. You're controlled by something way stronger than your mind. And I'd like to go after it and stop it. And I'd like your help.
Thank you. There were 7 brothers, Mike being the oldest, all affected. His father is a minister in a small Pennsylvania town in a cute little church. And they inspired me to do what I'm doing now. And I'd like to inspire others because it's powerful. And Mike, you've made a big difference to me, to a lot of people.
Thank you.
And these are his friends that are here that are all supporting the organization. Lawrence in the back is really runs the office, keeps everything going, keeps me in order as far as there's a lot to do. There's a lot of people I need to meet with, and there's not enough hours in the day. And thank goodness I'm able to do this. I'm really glad to be here. And like I said, this is pretty much the impetus of getting started. And the people in this room are hearing this the first time. This isn't something I've run around and done, and I'd like to. This is the inception. This is the beginning. And thank you, Senator Silver, for allowing me and introducing me to Edgar and Annie and Ellie and the members of your organization that have been helpful in being able to have this presentation. And it's not your typical presentation, but it should be. It should be the typical presentation in a lot of symposiums. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Steve and Ron, I really enjoyed the presentation. One of the organizations I have been affiliated with for quite some time, not recently as much as I have been in the past, but it has a lot of resources and a lot of influence. And you may want to consider the Rotary International. They have some powerful members and very influential in almost in every community. So if you can start an inroads to the presentation here, and especially as a South Florida group, is a very significant group. And if you can get, I can probably give Ron some names of some folk I know still involved. But if you can get this before them, I think you will see some significant change.
That'd be great. You know, wind me up, set me out wherever you can, and I think that'd be a great start. If anybody has the ability to open those doors and allow me to make this presentation, share this presentation with whoever you can, and see if they want to hear the truth and what's going on out there, because sometimes the truth hurts, but right now we need to feel good about doing something about this truth. And I think when we see that happen and we get in, and maybe you see something on the news that this is helping people, you're going to say, I remember where that started. Steve had that presentation to the Geese, you know, right here at the Four Seasons. And, you know, this is the beginning. And unfortunately, we didn't have this conversation years ago. But hey, it's never too late to start and do it right. And there's a reason I'm here, obviously. So, you know, take advantage of whatever I can do to help, or whoever you think I can engage with to bring the right parties together and make something really happen.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Any other questions, anyone, comments? Just hold on 1 second. Hold that spot. Coming to you.
Listen, thanks everybody. I really, really appreciate this. And hopefully we can make a difference, all of us.
Thanks, Doc. You don't mind me calling you Doc.
You can call me Doc, you can call me anything, I'll accept that.
We want to present you the certificate of appreciation to Steve Bate, PhD, and sincere appreciation for your outstanding presentation at our biannual educational and planning symposium, August 17, 2018. We want to thank you for the presentation that you gave, and we want you to keep up the good work. Don't lose the fight, and keep a vision of the forest. Look past the trees.
I appreciate it so much. One thing I have to say that's interesting, on my name tag it says Steve Bates. You got the name right here, it's just Steve Bate. If you knew my dad, he would, yeah, everybody's Bates, how come you guys are just Bate? My dad said, well, because we couldn't afford the S.
At least it ain't normal.
That's good.
Well, at least you're not Norman.
Dog with an S.
Yes.
It's good in there. All right. Got it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And if people have access to the media to get this word out, communicate it to them, because this needs to be on the headline news with a solution.
Before you go, please, can I?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay, here we go.
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect.
One second. Phone's going crazy, of course.
Speak to it.
Right. Come on, baby.
Got it?
Right. So I had it off because I didn't want
There you go. Take this.
to. Your phone?
Dáselo.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you guys.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much again. Thanks, everybody.
Great job. God bless. Thank you.
End of our symposium. Anybody have any comments, questions? Before we close out, we do appreciate you all for coming. taking out your time out of your busy schedule, put